get started. The first talk of the day is by Trevor Price on assessing bird population changes. Yeah.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to talk at this very important meeting. Today, I'm going to be talking about bird censuses we've conducted across India beginning in 1976. On the right-hand side here, you can see the locations we've worked at and the dates we've studied them. I'm going to briefly summarize the 5 methods we've used before giving you some results from the last 2. The first one is we've taken daily observations in a logbook everywhere, equivalent to eBird, which we're now collating. The second one is we've established 19 grids in the West Himalayas and 19 grids in the East Himalayas, where we conduct maps or create maps of singing males and observations as well, following the British Trust for Ornithology's Common Bird Census methods. We did this in the 2000s to ask why there are more species in the East Himalayas than the West Himalayas, but we intend to resurvey these in the 2020s. In a number of sites, we've used misnetting, which is supposed to be the most objective method because we believe misnets do not lie. The last 2 methods are the ones I'm going to give you a few results from. The most definitive method really is to capture birds, color band them, and then map their territories, which should give us a highly accurate estimate of bird density. And then finally, we use the tried and true method of line transects. All of these methods have been associated with measurements of resources, in particular insects. And here we can see Supriya, one of the researchers involved in this project, sorting insects in her assessments of effects on the abundance of insectivorous birds. So the 2 studies I'm going to expand on involve monitoring of warblers in winter. Many species of warbler come into India in the wintering season, having bred in the Himalaya and further north. They're extremely abundant, and this high abundance enables us to ask questions about their impacts on the community and what limits their populations. So we've conducted one study in Mundantarai, where the greenish warbler occurs in high abundance and is the only warbler in the tree crowns. And another study in Mahabaleshwar, where we have the yellow-browed warbler and the greenish warbler both coexisting along with other species. So the Mundantarai study I'm going to talk about was conducted by Madhusudan Karti between 1993 and 1997, where he was concerned with annual and seasonal changes of abundance of the greenish warbler, which spends from September to April in Mundantarai, where individual birds hold individual territories. And he was able to map these territories very closely and thereby understand the abundance of or estimate the abundance of birds on this 25-hectare plot where he worked. When he did this, he found a very striking result that the number of territories, i.e. the number of individuals, because they hold individual territories, strongly correlated with the abundance of insects that he measured. And you can see the correlation is so strong that this indicates that the population size of these greenish warblers was being strongly limited by winter food. There are 2 points that are important to take home from this, though. The one is that abundance fluctuated greatly with, in 1996, the numbers 60% of what they were in 1993. The second one is that the early years of the study, there was much higher abundance than there was in the later years of the study. So if you conducted a time series, you'd think the population was headed towards very low numbers, but that has not happened. In fact, we know much more about this due to Madhu's study. He was able to estimate or show that rainfall affected the number of leaves, that affected the number of arthropods, that affected the number of warblers. The correlations are so high that you can predict abundance of warbler based on rainfall. And you can see that in the years of low rainfall here, we had low numbers. In the years of higher rainfall, we had high numbers. So this strong correlation leads us to make an alternative prediction. Under climate change, we expect southern India to get wetter. And so this actually may be good for greenish warblers rather than bad. Well, Madhu's study led us to realize that we need to conduct long-term censuses And we established a site in Mahabaleshwar for both logistic reasons and because there are several species, not just the greenish warbler wintering there. And in this case, Kartika and Nitin Jamdar and myself have been doing line transects. There are 3 common species there, and each holds individual territories throughout the winter, as in Mandantarai, and they advertise these territories through call nodes. And so if you do a line transect, you can estimate the number of individuals that you're hearing from these different call nodes. Besides the 2 species I've already mentioned, the slender-billed leaf warbler is at high abundance in Mahabaleshwar, and unlike the other 2 species, it's an IUCN near threatened species because it has a very restricted breeding range in Kashmir. So just concentrating on the slender-billed leaf warbler here, the near threatened species, you can see we got a trend that sort of resembles what was happening in Mandantarai, where from 1998 to 2010, the population plummeted by about 75%. And we, at the time, thought this had something to do with climate change. The area as a whole is getting warmer, and it's warmed up by about 1 degree since 1990. But you can see we were fairly erroneous in this conclusion because after 2010, there's been a recovery. By 2015, the leaf warbler is back at the same abundance as it was at the beginning of the century. So we still do not know what has caused the abundance fluctuations of this species, but it indicates the importance of long-term censuses. So our conclusions from these 2 studies, as well as other ones, is that within habitat annual fluctuations can be large, but sometimes we've been able to relate this to both climate and resources. But this leads to the important point that long-term censuses are required if we're going to make strong conclusions. And this is really helped if we've got measurements of factors that might be causing these trends, including resources and habitat. And finally, I want to make the point that habitat loss here is not accounted for. All of our surveys have been in habitat that's been preserved. And in our final evaluations, we're going to have to look at land use change as well. Okay, I better stop now because I would really like that this is the final time. Right. Hopefully I'm there.
Yeah. Hi, Trevor. Thanks
Hi.
for joining us. Yeah. So we'll take some questions now.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't seem to see any questions in the. Please post your questions on the Day 2 channel on Slack under Trevor Price's name.
Maybe there's no questions.
I can only see the tag here. Would you like to add anything that you had to leave out of your talk?
Well, not really, except that, we could talk a bit more about monitoring in the Himalaya. And, we've got these 38 sites that we've established in the Himalaya with, both insect, climate, and habitat data that, we would encourage people to start visiting, actually. We're trying to monitor them ourselves, and we're going to probably do a monitor once every decade. But if, these should become more permanent sites, especially some of them.
Okay, some questions are coming in now.
Just before the conclusion, sorry. Yeah, okay.
Sorry? Yeah. So the first.
Yeah, what's a good question?
Yeah. Do you think one can use proxies for resources, like satellite-based canopy cover as a proxy for insect abundances?
Yeah, I do. I think it should be ground truthed. But, in Madhu's study, he even showed you could use rainfall.
Okay.
But greening up using satellites is a really good way to go.
Okay. Thanks. So the next question is from Tarun. He's asked the annual temperature fluctuations uh, were they sorry were they for the breeding range or non-breeding?
Now the temperature I showed you was Pune January temperature, which is when we do this non-breeding surveys in January, because that's the time of maximum food shortage. So basically in Pune, I don't know if you must know, but last January was exceptionally hot. And, if you just plot from 1990 through 2021, it's gone up by a degree.
Okay. We'll take one last question from Dhaval. Just before the conclusion slide, was it number of calls heard per hour or number of individuals calling?
No, number of individuals. So if we hear a bird calling, we strike that as one individual, and we sort of keep track of it as we're walking, so that we always, try and they're constantly calling, advertising their territories, so you can keep track of the number of individuals.
You've got a few more questions on this thread, Trevor, but we don't have any more time. So maybe you could respond to those questions on Slack directly.
Yeah, I will respond. It might be tomorrow though, because it's quite late tonight.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much for joining us so late. And
thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. See you.